Calls for protesting students to return to school. Electricity market under fresh scrutiny. And uproar in the U.S. over grand jury decision in chokehold death. Good evening. The Vice-Chancellor of Chinese University says the school has a mechanism in place to handle staff and students who may be found guilty of involvement in the Occupy protests. Joseph Song also called on students to return to school as soon as possible. Stephanie Cho reports.
Chinese University academic Chan Kin-man may face criminal charges along with other Occupy participants who have surrendered to police or plan to do so. University Vice-Chancellor Joseph Sung said today whether staff and students who have turned themselves in will be fired or punished if found guilty would depend on how serious their cases are. Sung said the university has a mechanism in place and that there's a need for a committee to consider the cases before presenting suggestions and proposals to the school council. Factors to consider include the extent of the staff or students' involvement with the movement, the impact of their actions on society and how it affects the university, Sung explained. Once again, the Vice-Chancellor called on students to go back to school as soon as they can. The Federation of Students said it's not ruling out the possibility of retreating and will discuss with occupiers over the next couple of days on the way forward. The Federation says a decision could come within a week. Meanwhile, Scholarism convener Joshua Wong and 4 others are still on hunger strike. Wong said his heart rate has gone up because he hasn't been feeling well. He apologized for drinking a glucose solution to boost his low blood sugar level after saying earlier he would only be drinking water while on hunger strike. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The High Court will decide tomorrow whether it would allow an appeal against a temporary injunction order covering the Admiralty protest zone. Earlier this week, the High Court granted All China Express Limited an interim injunction against protesters in parts of Connaught Road Central, Harcourt Road, and Cotton Tree Drive. The bus company submitted a map to the court this afternoon and was asked by the judge to shade the area covered by the order instead of simply outlining it. To other news now. A Consumer Council report slams existing rules governing the electricity market as unfair to consumers. It also urges more public participation and transparency in running the market. Here's Joa da Silva.
CLP Power and Hong Kong Electric have held a monopoly over separate parts of the city's electricity market for over a century. Operating under scheme of control agreements, the 2 power companies have been able to earn a high profit while passing business risks to consumers. That's one of the reasons a Consumer Council report puts forth for overhauling existing power market regulations. The problem is how to introduce further competition in the market while keeping electricity bills down. The study, jointly conducted by an international expert group, points out that retail market liberalization in other regions has brought benefits mostly to commercial users and not so much to domestic consumers.
What we have observed overseas is it tends to favor large industrial commercial consumers who have greater bargaining power to obtain a better deal for themselves. And so the electricity companies make less money from the large-scale commercial users, so they have to make up for the revenue shortfall elsewhere. And where do? They go to the residential consumers.
Instead, the study suggests liberalizing the power generation market and diversifying the fuel mix as a way to bring both long-term benefits to consumers and price stability to the market. As an example, it asks the government to look into making use of existing natural gas pipelines to boost small-scale cogeneration for commercial use. This usually involves the installation of gas turbines in large buildings such as malls and hospitals. The equipment is safe, reliable and relatively small for the amount of energy it produces.
From an environmental point of view, it's very attractive because the generation is very efficient, and typically you can use the heat that most power stations throw away. You can use that to heat water in the building or provide cooling or heating for the building. For the user, it tends to be very attractive because the price of generation is quite low.
The Consumer Council's report also points to a lack of transparency in the electricity market's regulatory framework and suggests setting up an energy commission in order to allow the public to have a say in policy making. João da Silva, TVB News.
The Antiquities Advisory Board today announced the Song Dynasty well found at the future To Kwa Wan MTR station will be removed and reinstated later. This could add $150 million to the cost of the Sha Tin Central Link, but much less expensive than the $1.3 billion expected for on-site preservation. Sitting in the middle of the future To Kwa Wan station of the Sha Tin Central Link is a Song Dynasty well as a 12-meter-long water channel dating back to the late Qing Dynasty. After months of debate, the Antiquities Advisory Board today decided to remove the two structures to be reinstated later.
In principle, we focus on the interpretation value and the inherited heritage value of the well in questions, and also the water channel. In that sense, we accept the proposal to dismantle the well by hand and reinstate it in the future with the flexibility confirmed by the MTRC that there's a possibility that we could reinstate the well and the duct at the same location.
That would cost an extra $10 million to $150 million. This is a fraction of the cost expected if the board had decided not to remove the structures. According to the MTR Corporation, if these antiquities were to be kept untouched, it would have cost $1.3 billion. The extra spending will mostly be on building a giant steel structure to support and protect the antiquities. Some of the funds will also be used to relocate some of the facilities in the new station, including fire services and ventilation installations. This and other changes in the construction of the railway line in connection with the preservation efforts will mean a delay of at least 4 months in the opening of the To Kwa Wan station. The construction firm will also have to be compensated for the delay. Turning overseas now, U.S. President Barack Obama says President Xi Jinping has consolidated power more quickly than any Chinese leader in decades. But as Alan Buchnia reports, Obama says that's not all positive.
He has consolidated power faster and more comprehensively than probably anybody since Deng Xiaoping. Everybody's been impressed by his clout inside of China after only a year and a half or 2 years. There are dangers in that on issues of human rights, on issues of clamping down on dissent. He taps into a nationalism that worries his neighbors and that we've seen manifest in these maritime disputes.
For Obama, a double-edged sword when it comes to Sino-U.S. relations. He believes Xi Jinping wants to have good ties with Washington. Obama said the U.S. wants to show Beijing it too wants a constructive win-win relationship. But then there are those dangers he mentioned. And Obama told the Business Roundtable group of top chief executives in corporate America that it's indisputable that Beijing has been engaging in cyber theft. Responding to Obama's comments, a foreign ministry spokeswoman said the two countries should focus on common interests despite their differences. Obama also had some tough words for another major leader, his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin.
I think the situation in Ukraine caught him by surprise. He has been improvising himself into a nationalist backward-looking approach to Russian policy that is scaring the heck out of his neighbors and is badly damaging his economy. And sanctions are having a big bite on their economy.
Alan Brooknia, TVB News.
Protests have erupted in the U.S. over yet another grand jury decision not to indict a white police officer over the death of an unarmed black man. The U.S. Attorney General strongly believes this case warrants a civil rights investigation. Here's Sonia Otero.
Eric Garner died after New York Police Department officer Daniel Pantaleo restrained him in a chokehold when he refused to be handcuffed, allegedly for selling illegal cigarettes. The deadly encounter on Staten Island was captured on video and quickly spread to the internet as a case of police brutality. The footage shows Pantaleo putting Garner in a chokehold, which is banned under New York's police policy. In it, you can hear Garner pleading with the police, repeatedly saying, "I can't breathe."
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Reverend Al Sharpton joined the victim's family in saying this case and the police shooting of an unarmed black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri, prove the U.S. is dealing with a national crisis.
We have no confidence in local state prosecutions because state prosecutors work hand in hand with the local police.
The victim's family is shocked the grand jury couldn't see excessive force used by the accused policeman and refused to accept his condolences.
I don't know what video they were looking at. Evidently, it wasn't the same one that the rest of the world was looking at. No, I could care less about his condolences. He's still working, he's still getting a paycheck, he's still feeding his kids, and my husband is 6 feet under, and I'm looking for a way to feed my kids now.
Despite a grand jury's decision not to investigate, the U.S. Justice Department feels the need to probe further.
I spoke with the widow of Eric Garner to inform her and her family of our decision to investigate potential federal civil rights violations.
Thousands of angry demonstrators marched through New York. Many were arrested for blocking off traffic as they chanted, "I can't breathe," and "Hands up, don't choke." Dozens also marched in the nation's capital carrying banners that read, "Indict the system." And in California, protesters blared the words, "Black Lives Matter." Sonia Artero, TVB News.
A fire at a Hokkaido spa hotel in Japan forced the evacuation of 60 people, 17 of them Hong Kong holidaymakers.
A huge cloud of black smoke rose from the spa hotel this morning. According to the Japanese media reports, the affected hotel is Kurakun Ryokan at Asarugawa Onsan, located near Otaru in Hokkaido. The fire broke out at around 7:30. It's believed that the blaze started near the hotel's boiler room. All 60 people in the hotel, including guests and hotel employees, managed to escape unscathed. 17 of them are visitors from Hong Kong. Their travel documents and luggage have been destroyed in the fire. The Hong Kong Immigration Department will offer assistance to the